Okay, so when we think about a brand, this is a term that I'm sure you all have heard recently through like social media, through the news, through interacting with other companies or your own. But this term brand kind of is very, can be elusive and it can be hard to define. Like when we think about a brand, what are we talking about? We're talking about you as an individual, your company, and what the company kind of represents to the rest of the world. So there's a number of elements that comprise your brand. You could think about the tone and voice that you have when you speak to the outside world. You could think about your brand promise, which is kind of like what you represent to customers and what they get out of their relationship with you. But also like the whole experience that customers have, meaning like from the beginning when they learn about your business through the end process, what the experience of working with you is like throughout the way, in addition to the products that you sell or services that you offer. Logo is a very highly associated sort of aspect of a brand when it comes to the visual identity, right? So most people, when they think of the brand, they think of the logo. But the important aspect of what I'm here to share with you guys as potential small business owners or current small business owners is that your visual identity in your brand is much more than just your logo. And what we're here to talk about is how your visual identity creates value for your business and helps you communicate with customers, and how the visual identity is not just your logo and not just how your brand looks, but rather a set of cohesive elements that help your customers identify who you are and helps you communicate effectively and consistently with your customers. What is this? What brand am I showing you? Target, right. So this is Target's logo, right? And as you might imagine, this logo is a core part of their visual identity. But when we say their visual identity is much more than just their logo, ways to think about it. This is an ad for Target, right? So we see the color, the shape of their brand mark or their logo making its way into the advertisement. When you go into a Target store, right, you know invariably that you are at a Target through the texture, the color, the presentation of everything from the individual cards on the aisles when you're shopping, to the receipts, to the guest services, to everything, right? Every kind of touch point has a visual expression that communicates the same message, right? So we talked about whether you're looking at your receipt or you're in the physical space, Target has a recognizable, consistent expression. And so the quicker someone recognizes you and your brand, the more valuable your business is. Meaning whatever space that you're going to be operating in, the ability to get a customer to recognize that your company is the one they're interacting with is valuable. So the faster you can do that, the more value you're going to create. And visual identity is a really awesome way to do that because it's such a instantaneous method of communication. So that is going to really kind of help build trust and loyalty. So part of what makes Target for those who shop anywhere in the country or world when they see one is the trust that they feel that is communicated through the visual elements that let you say this is a Target and this is the same Target that I went to in another town, and the visual elements of their actual company or logo that kind of find its way into each touch point helps you trust that company. Two things that you may not have thought about that are very important. One is saving time and effort and cost in future applications. Okay, so we're going to talk about what elements there are in a brand, but when you have a very consistent brand expression visually that is a system, that is not just a logo, but rather a set of cohesive elements that you can apply to any environment, whether it be physical, like the signs we see, or digital, like your social media presences or websites or emails, the more effortlessly you're able to apply your brand to those touch points, the more time and money you're going to save, right? If your brand is set up in a way where you can automatically apply it to an email, to a sign, to a piece of printed collateral, right? Knowing how to apply it there is going to be cheaper than having to start from scratch each time you create a thing, right? When you create a business card, you need to know, how does my brand apply to the business card? And if you start from scratch, then you're spending time, you're spending money, you're spending effort, and you're not getting the same value of recognition, of effortless communication, of saying, I know who I'm talking to based on the visual elements, the mark, this term mark or logo mark. So we looked at that Target logo, right? And a mark is kind of the core, simplest essence or expression of a brand. A really good way to think about what your mark is going to be is when you go to a website, does the term favicon mean anything to people in the room? Do we know what that is? If you go to a website, you see at the top of your little tab, there's a tiny little like 16 pixel by 16 pixel icon that represents the website that you're on, right? If you can't imagine what I'm saying, next time you are on a website, look at the top corner of where it says the name of the website. That you have to express visually what website you're on there. The way that your logo translates into that 16 pixel by 16 pixel spot is more or less your mark. Your mark is the simplest visual element that communicates who you are, right? We have to think about dark colors, light colors, horizontal, vertical, right? When we think about your logo, it's your mark applied. So say for example, we talk about Target, right? Target is red and white. How does the mark look on a red background or on a white background? If it has to go in a space that is very square, how does it apply? If it has to go in a space that's very long and vertical, how does it apply? If it has to go into a space that's very horizontal, how does it apply? So the core mark applied into all of those environments is the logo configuration or kind of core mark system. Having configurations that apply or let your brand translate into every single touch point that your logo needs to live is a huge aspect of the visual identity core. So the more configurations or the more your single configurations can apply broadly, the more value your visual identity system will have. So what we're gonna do now is kind of talk about 5 or 6 criteria that you can use to evaluate your logo and logo system to determine if it is creating value for you or how much value it's creating for you. Now, I will say as a caveat before we go through these are like rules and principles that help you think about your company and the way that you communicate your company visually to the outside world. But they are rules of thumb, and they are true until they're not. And the reason I say that is because when you visually communicate with other people about your company through all of your materials, you create equity for the logos and expressions that you already have. So if you already have a company, the way you've been communicating with people has already some level of recognition, right? Even if your logo doesn't meet all of these criteria, you should evaluate or think about how much equity have I built into the visual expression I currently have. And you should think about it when you decide and evaluate how to build or iterate upon what you currently have, because you want to make sure you're not throwing away a lot of value just because you feel like it doesn't meet certain like higher level criteria, like a massive billboard that you see on the highway, right? And so an example that we like to use that's one of the most adaptable marks in addition to Target is this, right? Apple. This little apple glyph, you know it because it's small, it's simple, you can draw it in a minute on a tiny little piece of paper with a pencil, right? It's not complex. And so the simplicity of the form of the logo helps it be adaptable and scale up and scale down.
And when they came out with that, it bore no relationship to what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were producing a computer.
Yeah. You create that, like, that's a good point. So as we go through the visual expression, like, and the notion of things like logos and what your brand is, like, independent of the value you inject into it, it's nothing but artwork or design work, right? So like that little Apple icon, like that means nothing if Apple doesn't build value into it. So we talked about simplicity being important. So you need to kind of like consider things like distinction in relation to simplicity. And also think about it relative to the space that you're operating in. If you work within a certain industry, maybe it's hospitality or maybe it's more of a service that you're providing, think about the competitors that your potential customers are evaluating when looking at your business, and ask yourself, is the way that I'm visually communicating my company very distinct from the other people in this same area and industry, right? And so it's interrelated to things like adaptability and the universality of it, but it's really important to make sure that you're standing out from the crowd.